Our parliamentarians are finally going back to the House of Commons, and in the meantime, there are going to be two by-elections, all under the growing specter of could we be having a general election. Hello, I'm Adrienne Batra. With me are Lorrie Goldstein and Brian Lilley. So, Brian, they're going back to work on Monday, back to the House of Commons. You know, it's debatable whether how long they should sit, because sometimes the longer they sit, the stupider laws that they pass. But here we are. They're going back to the House of Commons. And there are going to be two by-elections on the same day, important, significant by-elections. And this, as we have growing speculation that we could, maybe not, could be going into a general election.
It's amazing that they picked September 16th as the date for these two by-elections. One in Montreal area, LaSalle and Verdun, and the other in Winnipeg area, Elmwood, Transcona, because this could definitely be bad news for the government. And the government controls when the House resumes, and they pick the election day. So who thought this was a good idea? They could have had it this past Monday, and then the news cycle would have petered out by then. But there's a good chance the Liberals could lose to the NDP in LaSalle and Verdun. Of course, I'm also hearing the Bloc could be doing well. It's been a Liberal seat for a long time, not always. The NDP held most of this riding. Redistribution happened a little while ago, but they've represented the area from 2011 to 2015. But this riding's up for grabs because Trudeau's former Justice Minister, David Lametti, stepped down. And by the way, this used to be Paul Martin's riding. So it is a Liberal stronghold, but it might go to the NDP. If that happened, or the Bloc, if that happens, Justin Trudeau comes back to Parliament weaker. In Winnipeg, the Elmwood Transcona riding has gone conservative at times, but it's mostly been NDP, and the Conservatives are fighting hard for it. If they get an upset there, then it weakens Jagmeet Singh and his now mantra that he's the only person that can stop Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives. If the Conservatives stop him in Winnipeg, Jagmeet Singh's in trouble. So there's a whole lot of stuff going on. Trudeau saying he's looking forward to mixing it up with Poilievre, and Singh saying, I don't support the government anymore, but I won't vote against them. And I don't support the carbon tax. It's hurting working people, but he won't vote against it. There's a lot of drama in the next couple of weeks. For someone in my job, it's going to be fun.
Well, Lorrie, I mean, politics on this side of the border has finally become a little bit more interesting, that's for sure. The Liberals are coming off of a caucus retreat where a number of the Liberal MPs did not attend, but there has been some of the MPs that have been there. They've come out. They're trying to show this notion of solidarity, that no, they're not actually all angry at Justin Trudeau. Yet you go to the other side of the country, you hear from a Liberal MP that's basically saying, she said, Trudeau can't win. And then you go even further east, you have a boneheaded MP out in the Atlantic Canada, Liberal MP saying, Canadians, our people are EI people. I mean, like all of this goofy stuff sort of coming out, no consistency. But based on where we are in terms of the by-election, if it's a split, Conservatives win Manitoba, the one in Manitoba, NDP wins the one in Quebec, does that put any more pressure on anybody in that Liberal caucus to say, all right, enough's enough. We're back in the House. We need a new leader.
Well, the way I look at it is that when the Liberals lost their stronghold in Toronto before the House adjourned, they got to do something, right? Remember, there was the panic. There wasn't a revolt in the caucus. There were a few mainly former Liberals saying it's time for Trudeau to go. But the message coming out of that from the Liberals and the PMO was that, okay, we're not going to have an emergency caucus meeting because it's impossible to organize that. But the Premier and his advisors are going to be talking to MPs across the country, getting a good idea of what's going on. So we're ready in the fall when we have our scheduled cabinet and caucus meetings with a new agenda. None of that has happened. Cabinet basically said at their retreat, the Liberal cabinet, we're standing behind Trudeau and we're ready to go. the caucus meeting this week, it was business as usual. They were simply going through. To me, they're simply going through the motions. What's been the change? The change people expected, the biggest one would be for Trudeau to resign. That hasn't happened. A secondary one would be, okay, new cabinet, new policies, new direction. That hasn't happened. So to me, going into these by-elections on Monday, they're in exactly the same position they were, because the numbers haven't changed at all compared to when they lost the by-election in Toronto before. So to me, the Liberals are kind of paralyzed. The Prime Minister says he's ready to go in and fight Pierre Poilievre. When hasn't he said that? Mm-hmm. The other reality is that the former Liberal NDP alliance, now Singh has broken that up, but the two weakest parties now are the Liberals and the NDP. And so basically, to me, you have these things about Will Singh may not support the carbon tax because he doesn't think working people should bear the cost. Well, I'm sorry. If you put a price on emissions, all of us end up bearing the cost. That's just the way it is. You raise prices for industry, you raise prices for all of us. So, okay, now the United States doesn't have a carbon tax, so you can certainly have an emissions reductions program without having a carbon tax. But Singh supported Trudeau's carbon tax over and over and over again when he was part of the coalition. The wild card to me is the Bloc, because to me, the Bloc has more power now. Look, the government, even if the NDP were to say to the Liberals, we're voting against your carbon tax along with the Conservatives, which would be horrible in terms of perception for the NDP. Even if they said that, the government doesn't fall. There's not enough seats there. For the government to fall, it has to be the Conservatives, the NDP, and the Bloc. And the Bloc leader has said, frankly, quite smartly, well, wait a minute. We're not going to automatically bring down the government. We might even support it in return for concessions from the federal government for Quebec.
And you're seeing that now with the discussion about taking asylum seekers from Quebec and spreading them across the country. Blaine Higgs, the New Brunswick premier, said he was told your province is going to get 4,600 new people who are asylum seekers. And by the way, you're not getting any extra money for it. That's going to be wildly unpopular, by the way, in New Brunswick, where the Liberals still do hold some seats, although likely fewer in the next election.
Well, and it certainly shows that the Bloc is very good at exercising their muscle and exercising those powers, because they have basically said to Trudeau, we need more money and you have to start, we can't handle all the asylum seekers and that are coming into Quebec. You got to start sending them across the country, as Brian just pointed out, in terms of New Brunswick, and then certainly Ontario will get some, and it will be that type of muscle that the Bloc exerts, certainly, which is good for the province of Quebec. But I'm wondering, Brian, in terms of this whole conversation that Jagmeet Singh is saying, look, I'm the only one that can stop Pierre Poilievre. I'm the only one with the power and the courage to block a potential conservative government. Back to that by-election, though, if the NDP win both, one in Quebec and one in Manitoba, doesn't that buttress his argument?
It will really help Jagmeet Singh if he wins both. If he wins in Quebec and loses in Manitoba, though, that puts a big hole in his argument.
Yeah,
they'll be cheering that he wins in Montreal, but he's got to win Winnipeg. Part of the reason that they dropped out of the coalition, and I got this from Carl Boulanger, longtime New Democrat, top aide to Jack Layton and Tom Mulcair. Carl was on the Full Comment podcast that I host earlier this week, and he was saying part of the reason they decided to pull out was in the Elmwood-Transcona by-election in Winnipeg, they were hearing at the door that it was hurting them. You're too close to the Liberals. We don't like this. That was part of their calculus for saying, we've got to get out and we've got to get out now. And so it's not the rail strike, because they made the decision before the binding arbitration was imposed. I think they even shot the video before that. It was, this is hurting us. They finally figured out that standing that close to Justin Trudeau, who stinks to high heaven at the moment, is bad for their political hygiene.
And Lorrie, on the other side of it, look, we see the national opinion polls. If there's anything that Canadians agree upon, it's one thing: they want this Trudeau government gone. They want, at any opportunity they have, they want to see change in this country. Pierre Poilievre looks like that change. I mean, if we were to look at the polls as they stand now, of course, we know things will tighten, things change, campaigns matter, all those things. But we're looking at a likely Conservative government. If the Conservatives can't pull off Manitoba's by-election in Elmwood-Transcona, we know that the likelihood of Montreal is so far out of the realm for the Conservatives. But if they can't do that, what's Pierre Poilievre saying then, after, if they lose both?
To me, that would not be as devastating as what happened to the Liberals in Toronto, because this was, and the other thing for me is that, look, there'll be spin. As Brian said, if the Liberals were to take two, it would help the Liberal. It would have, sorry, if an NDP were to take two, it would definitely be a boost. Then there's a lot of rhetoric you can do, and it's the Conservative, but it doesn't change the underlying narrative in Canada, which is that whether or not people want an election, because there's some question that people never want an election. The issue is they will vote if there's an election. And on that issue, the mood is that whatever Canadians want, very few of them want the Trudeau government. And the Trudeau government, in the past few months, since the summer adjournment, hasn't really done anything of significance. And so to me, that still drives the narrative, is that the Conservatives have successfully portrayed themselves as the agent of change in what I think most Canadians want is a change election.
That's right.
Not the NDP. The NDP to me, and Mr. Singh, it strikes me as bravado. Look at the numbers. The numbers that more than a year of polling have shown. The Conservatives often score higher than the Liberals and NDP combined. So to me, the only—
They do right now, don't they? On national numbers, yeah.
Yeah, the only game changer right now to me is if Trudeau resigns. And without that, I think for all the frou-frou in Ottawa, I think most Canadians right now are focused on the American election with good reason. And I think, and I could be wrong, but I think a snap election is very unlikely, because the two parties that were part of the coalition, they're in the worst shape to hold an election. So they will, to me, Singh will make a speech, but he's not gonna vote against or to bring down the government. And anyway, that decision is in the hands of the bloc. So I don't think there'll be a lot of churn. I don't think there'll be a lot of significant change until the American election is resolved. And
Look,
then
as fun as it is, Brian, and last word to you on this is to expect or think that we could be on the precipice of a federal election. I think Lorrie's right. I don't think it's going to happen. There's a lot of MPs on all sides of the aisle that need those pensions vested, and that happens next year. And one of those people, of course, is the leader of the NDP. So again, looking forward, they're likely to fall of 2025. And I still maintain I don't think Trudeau's going anywhere. I think he feels like he's in fighting form. And just finally, with that, he's coming back to the legislature, beleaguered and defeated again with this agreement with the NDP being pulled out from underneath him. But is there any sense of renewal for him? They've got this big Mark Carney announcement. What are we expecting from the legislature, from the House of Commons, from the Liberals in this next session? Is there anything that we think that they are going to do to either turn their electoral fortunes around or change course.
No, I took the idea of an early election because I thought, strategically, it could work for Trudeau. I know the polls would say right now that it can't, but my thinking was, if we end up in an early election, just after the House comes back, and Trudeau campaigns against Donald Trump for 37 days, maybe he moves up to that 32% that he needs to try and score, and maybe he pulls votes away from the Conservatives. And I floated that idea by several people, including Liberals that I talked to, and even people who've been close to Trudeau said, no, that still won't work. We don't think it's there. That won't be a good strategy. And one of them said to me on this idea of renewal, they said the smart thing to do would have been, after the by-election in Toronto St. Paul's, announce that you're proroguing the House, you're coming back in the fall with a new agenda and a speech from the throne, and actually have a speech from the throne. Instead, they did nothing, as Lorrie pointed out, and then came back with this last minute, Mark Carney's going to babysit Chrystia Freeland. I can't believe she hasn't. And when you look at what Mark Carney really holds dear, it's the carbon tax and a bunch of other left-wing policies that Justin Trudeau already puts forward. So there is no renewal, there is no change, and they are, as Lorrie said, going through the motions, and that's not going to alter anything. And Pierre Poilievre is running, doing things very smartly. He's not scaring the public. He's not giving them anything to say, yeah, I'm a big scary man that's going to wreck the place. And in the interview that I did with them, that will be airing on our channels on Sunday night, make sure you tune in, I asked him about some of the things that the Liberals say and the NDP say he's going to cut, and very interesting answers out of him.
Well, let us know what you think in the comments below. Like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And go to thetorontosun.com. You'll find commentary and coverage there you will not find anywhere else.